Hello, everyone. Wednesday, 11 a.m. Great questions. Great call last week. We talked about how to fix shoulders. I think today is going to be about something from the lower body, but who knows?
Hi, everyone. Yes, to give a little recap of last week, we did talk about the whole concept of guaranteed progress and kind of like what are the pillars of that progress, so to speak. And we did talk about the example of the shoulder, like with we had like bone displacement in the shoulder, and when this then kind of like negatively targets the rotator cuff muscles and how to help that whole thingy. And this week, I would love for us to touch on the lower body with that whole frame, kind of like speaking about the hip.
Mhm. Cool. So, from my perspective, and I talked about it last week, but let's just recap it real quick. So, I thought about, okay, how can I 100% guarantee no progress in training for your hips? The first one is Um, if I guarantee that your hip is moving all the time, this will lead to no training progress eventually, especially on the low. Think about your pelvis tilting in a deadlift, for example, right? Not good. Okay, cool. That's the first one. How can we fix that? The second one is if you use more smaller muscles than bigger muscles. What does it mean for the hips and the deadlift, for example? This means, okay, you're going to use more like your hip flexors or your lower back muscles or your quads rather than the bigger muscles, which is the hamstrings and the glutes, for example, right? So if I only use smaller muscles, that means my lower back is inflared all the time, my hip flexors ache. This will guarantee no progress long term. Okay, how can we fix that? How can we make the big muscles do the work instead of the small ones? And the third one is if you if you're not increasing the load over time, this will absolutely guarantee no measurable progress as well. So that means, very simply speaking, okay, you have to use more weight over time. Okay,
Mhm.
so let's take a quick look at the hips. Um, let's actually stick with the deadlift as an example.
Mhm.
So the main goal is always a neutral pelvis to stabilize the neutral pelvis, which means no tilting of the hips while using a big muscle, which is the glute max first. Okay, so what's the starting point? If I get those two, that means I can increase the load over time. So third one's fixed if I get the neutral hips right plus the glute max activation. Okay, so what does it mean for the deadlift? Let's start with the glute max first. So the job that we have to teach the glute max, the tension job is stabilizing, producing, and absorbing tension. All three needs to be developed equally. Otherwise, your glute max cannot work fully, which will not lead to neutral pelvis. That means your hips are going to tilt under load. This is not what we want. So we're going to start with tension in the hips first, and I'll make it very practical. What is stabilizing the glute max in your hips? Um, Super simple example, a carry, right? I love the frame carry, could be a farmer carry, could be whatever. It doesn't really matter as long as you understand what you're shooting for. And this is not the carry per se, but what you have to do action wise once you do the carry. So if you start walking, let's pick a frame carry for that sake. We pick up the frame carry and we walk. It's not just walking, but I have to focus on, okay, I have to squeeze my right butt cheek when my right leg is in the air and vice versa on the left leg. So this is what I'm literally practicing with every step. When I do a frame carry, not under max weight, but practice wise, I think about tucking my hips underneath, like a dog puts his tail underneath him, right? So I think about almost butt winking my pelvis, which is obviously not going to happen when I'm just walking. But this is what I'm that is
Mhm.
the picture that I'm creating in my head because that's what I'm shooting for. So that's how you learn how to stabilize your hips is not talking about it, not just knowing it, but practicing it practically while doing a farmer carry or any carry out there. Stabilizing means the glute max, neither shortens nor lengthens. That's what stabilizing is all about. So, what's my favorite go-to exercise for absorbing tension in the glute max? Of course, is the box squat. We talked about this at length already, because now you're learning how to absorb tension while shooting your hips back. This is the second function, the second job you need for tension in the glute max. And the third one is producing, which is one of my favorites, the chainsaw row pull or stamp clean, doesn't really matter. It's about learning how to swivel at the hips using your glute max. This is the glute max lengthening, and that's the third job we have to learn. So if I start learning those three jobs, doing the, for example, exercises that I've mentioned, this will lead to neutral pelvis over time. This will lead to less bone displacement. This will lead to less small muscles being used. This will lead to technically unlimited weight addition over time. This is how you fix your hips.
And how do you kind of like combine those jobs with those exercises with the ultimate goal of the deadlift?
Very good question. You don't have to, and that's the epiphany moment I had. I thought, okay, I have to do systems work for the glute max, and then I'm going to do deadlift, and a miracle is going to happen. The two atoms are going to merge together,
and a happy baby is going to be created. But in reality, this is not how it works. So if you do, for my example, the frame carry, focusing on stabilizing glute max. If you do the box squat, focusing on absorbing tension in the glute max. If you do the chainsaw row pull for producing tension in the glute max. If you do all three, your deadlift will get better. You can move more weight without your lower back hurting. Yes, there's a couple of technical things that you can learn about the deadlift for sure, but you have to position and you have to tension ready to actually be able to do the technical work. And I think that's the major difference of how we teach stuff. We don't look at technique or rotation first. We look at position and tension, and as the aftermath of those two, rotation and I'm blanking right now. What was the other one?
Talk.
Rotation and
talk.
Which word did I just say? And the technical stuff, rotation and technique are going to be in place. There's no need to practice technique. Technique will happen if you do position and tension as just described. So you will move more weight on the deadlift if you do those three exercises, know what to focus on, and you don't have to practice the deadlift for ages with the empty barbell or very low weight. Yes, one more time. Yes, you have to practice some deadlift technique. Trust me, it's going to be much easier if your glute max is working as described.
But what does this mean for like now practical terms?
It's very interesting. I can't hear you. But one more time.
What does this now practically mean for someone who just wants to deadlift? Like, how much time should they spend like working on those three jobs to finally get pretty much to the cake they want to have, which is deadlift?
Okay. We have to differentiate a little bit between, a normal person training twice or three times a week and their goals, and maybe like a professional power lifter that does this for a living. Let's stick with my beloved normal people who are training 2 to 3 times a week. You don't have to actually deadlift with a barbell at all to do all the stuff that you want to do. If that is a goal of yours, I respect that and I appreciate that. That will mean, very practically speaking, like once every 2 weeks, you can do a couple of deadlifts, right? Practice some technique stuff. That's fine. Practice whatever you want to practice on the deadlift, whether it's your stance or your grip or whatever you fancy practicing on the deadlift. Once every 2 weeks, like one session with a couple of reps is more than enough. All the time in the world, like 95% are going to go through the position and tension training, which is talked about, through the exercises I explained beforehand. This is where the majority of the work, time, and energy goes in. And the outcome will be your deadlift will feel different. And this is the feedback we get from our peeps, because you can fiddle around on like correcting your pelvis position 15 times a week and practice some stuff. But if you just do the stuff that I mentioned, it will be there. And that's the fascinating stuff about it. You don't have to think about your pelvis at some point. It has to be automatically there. Otherwise, guess what? It's not going to work on the load, because weird example coming. what are you thinking about being chased by a bear or lifting a 300 kilo deadlift off the floor? I hope for the first one is just run and fucking escape. And for the second one is just get it up to your hips, right? That's all you should think about. If you're thinking about hip rotation while being chased by a bear or your pelvis position while deadlifting 300 kilos, you have already lost, right? So this is what training is for. It has to happen automatically. Same as with driving a car. You cannot think at some point about pushing whatever, the throttle and gears and mirrors and all that kind of stuff. At some point, it has to become second nature and just be there automatically, right? Some people wait too much automatically, but it's a different story.